Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm Andy RC, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the Frsky R9M long-range module. Now, at the making of this video, most places have them listed for about 30 GBP due to an alleged altercation with TBS. So in a response to that, Frsky has reduced the price to 30 GBP as a kind of up yours to the situation. Now, some of this is conjecture, and I'm sure the price is going to be a temporary thing, and I'm a little bit annoyed myself because I paid 72 GBP for mine, and that's without the mini receiver that they're shipping with it as well. But anyways, that's my issue and not yours. So this long-range system has been out a good while now, and it seems like it's just starting to get some momentum and be useful. For example, at the making of this video, if you are in the EU like me, then you are restricted in terms of power output and telemetry compared to the FCC version. But now it seems that that is getting resolved, or is on the way to being resolved, and this could very well be a cheap alternative to the TBS Crossfire system. But before I go on, a few weeks ago I bought the full Crossfire system, and it is just brilliant, and it's better than the R9 system. However, after buying it, I was eating rice for the rest of that month, so if a slightly less convenient but much cheaper option is available, then I think people are going to flock to it. So at the making of this video, the EU version is limited to a 25 milliwatt output, and that is with telemetry. And you can go up to 500 milliwatt, but you can't do telemetry if you want that high power output. Whereas the FCC version can go up to 1 watt, and that is with full telemetry. Now, I know 25 milliwatt of 868 megahertz will get you pretty far, but that's not really the point. And as I say, this system is still in its infancy, and Frsky has just released what they are calling the Flex version of the firmware, which in my opinion needed to be there all along. So, just like the 2.4 gig Frsky receivers, this long-range system has two different firmwares, the EU LBT and the FCC. And it's a regulation thing, but Crossfire lets you select yourself which one you want to be on. And up to now, Frsky requires you to flash your R9M module with either the EU version or the FCC version, and it's the same for the receiver. So running the 2.4 gig FCC version in Europe is not really a big deal for your setup because it's a regulation thing. However, running the FCC version of the R9M in Europe could give you some problems. For example, here I think some of the 3G band runs on the 900 megahertz frequency, and I'm hearing some stories of people getting fail-safes when they try the FCC version at close range in Europe. So we need a way to quickly change to the EU version, which runs on 868 megahertz, and we also need to have the same power options as the FCC for it to be attractive for us. And you know, I buy all of my receivers from Banggood, and they most likely will come with the FCC version flashed to it. Now, I've been using the R9 mini receiver, and it costs £9, which is just an amazing price. It's cheaper than the XM Plus, and it does full telemetry, unlike the XM Plus. So it's a really cost-effective system, but they do come flashed with the FCC version. So it's going to be the usual pain of hooking up my test clamps and flashing the right firmware to it. But supposedly this Flex firmware is going to put both EU and FCC versions on the module and the receiver, and you'll be able to choose which one you need through OpenTX without doing any flashing. It's also going to give the EU version the same power output as the FCC, and I really hope that they start shipping these receivers with that firmware as stock. Otherwise, it's going to be a case of like flashing them every time, which is not a lot of fun. Now, it's easy to flash the R9M module. You just go to the Frsky website and download the Flex firmware, and then you put it on your transmitter's SD card and go into the transmitter menu and then flash external module, and it writes, and then that is done. There is a slight catch at the making of this video though, in that you have to have OpenTX version 2.23, which is only in a nightly build stage at the making of this video, and Frsky themselves advise you not to fly off a nightly build. So at this point, unlocking the EU version to its full potential is a risk, and hopefully that will be quickly resolved. And just to let you know, I've tried this nightly build and it's still not letting me select the full power output or telemetry in the EU settings, so it seems like there is still some work to be done yet. And when you compare all of this to Crossfire, then Crossfire updates the receiver's firmware automatically over the air, and I think it's a superior product in general, but of course it comes at a price. So I think it's looking good for this R9 system. And by the way, if you bought the R9 system for the X-Lite, then supposedly this Flex firmware also unleashes more power for that, up to 100 milliwatt, I think, with full telemetry. So that is all of the firmware stuff out of the way. So how do you actually use it? Well, it bolts onto the back of your Frsky transmitter. You need to turn off the internal RF module in OpenTX and enable the R9M for the external module. You can see that I can switch between the FCC and EU version within the transmitter itself, and I can alter the number of channels just like you can with the 2.4 system, and the delay in milliseconds will change as the channels reduce. Of course, Crossfire has lower latency than this system, but it's not something I can tell myself. People say they can, I can't tell the difference. So from here we can bind the receiver, and it binds in exactly the same awkward way as the 2.4 system, so you have to hold down the bind button on the receiver while powering it up and then press bind in the transmitter, and you're going to want to select telemetry with this one and no pulses for the failsafe. I'm keeping the RF power to 100 milliwatt, and when you select 1 watt it will go into adaptive power mode so that it doesn't harm the receiver when both TX and RX are close to each other. And to stop your transmitter's battery from dying at high power outputs, you can add an external 2S battery to cope with the load, and we have an XT30 on the back for that. The telemetry works exactly the same as the 2.4 system, so you'll have to discover new sensors, and then you can add the Betaflight Lua script, which will give you your PIDs and various other things in Betaflight. The RSSI is done the same as the other Frsky telemetry receivers, so you have to set it up as an input with 100 dB as the gain, and then copy that channel into the mixer and then give it a scale of 200 and minus 100 in the settings, and then you can output that as an aux channel in Betaflight in the receiver tab. You will notice on the back that the module has some switches and a button, and this is purely for using in PPM mode. So the switches combined with the bind button can bind in PPM mode, and the different switch combinations select the different power output, but my advice would be to just use the S-bus then. All of that can be controlled in OpenTX and you don't have to touch any of the switches or anything like that. There are some breakout pins on the back for S-port, so you don't have to remove the module. If you want to flash your receiver through it, you can do it this way. And that's about it. Of course, always remember to attach the antenna when powering up the module, and let me know what you think of this system in the comments and whether you're going to go for it over the 2.4 system, because this is a long-range system, but for mini quads, we're not flying long range, so for me, this is just for getting better penetration when flying around concrete and thick objects and things like that, to give you peace of mind with those more expensive builds, you know, if you're wanting to take more risks and things like that to get good footage. I'll leave a link in the description if you wish to get one, and if you enjoyed this video and can afford to do so, then I will link to my Patreon in the below. This stuff is very time consuming and it would help me out a lot. So as always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.